So, hi everybody, and welcome to another episode of In Conversation With. My name is John Lunn, aka Jonnychipz, and in this video series we talk all things cloud with experts and advocates right across the industry, covering a wide variety of topics from skills and careers through to technical overviews and soft skills. So whether you're watching this on YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, LinkedIn, thanks so much for tuning in. It really is appreciated. Please do take part in the chat. Drop us a like, a comment, subscribe. Really is appreciated. And don't forget to click on that little bell notification. So on today's episode, I'm thrilled to be joined by an amazing colleague of mine. She's a technical consultant working in the data arena at the moment. So based in the UK, I'd like to welcome my next guest on In Conversation With as Emma Dolling. Hiya, Em. How you doing?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
I'm very well. Thank you for joining me. How's things with you today?
Yeah, really good. Been finishing up on some cloud data designs, keeping myself busy.
As you do. Yeah. No rest for the wicked, eh?
No, you've known me too long.
Yeah, I know, and it's pretty cool. Like, you know, for everybody out there watching, me and Em work together, and I've regularly said to him, look, I want to get you on a show, want to get a one of these episodes done. It's only really one member of the team that I've ever interviewed internally. It's quite crazy, isn't it, Em? The amount of time I've been doing this. So
yeah.
Anyway, give yourself a better introduction than I did. Then let us know a bit about your background, who you are, what you're up to. That'd be cool, Em, if you want to kick off from there.
Yeah, sure. Well, as John's already introduced me, we do work together at BT, and data's definitely the arena that I do the core of my work in, and the majority of my interest. Wasn't always the case. I actually fell into data almost accidentally, really. My core background was surprisingly enough in finance and pensions, of all things, and I think sort of slowly led on to working with Oracle and pension systems and doing bits and pieces for a well-known pension provider, which then moved me into working as a sysadmin, really, again, with an Oracle background, which is not where I've ended up. When it comes to database technologies, I've kind of gone towards SQL Server now in the later part of my career. And I've sort of worked with charities and looked after sort of databases for charities and databases for local councils. And then I was lucky enough to work with a police force and got to do some cool tech things like car trackers, measuring blues and twos when they're needed, whether they're needed, and I had quite a bit of fun in custody, working with the criminals.
I'm going to say not being arrested, then just actually working with.
No, just actually working
completely professional level.
Yeah, it was all about the ID parade system, and recording videos of people that have been arrested to add them to that ID parade system.
Wow. Okay. Yeah.
So yeah, quite interesting. And then I moved to BT. And I did a year on the support desk again as a SQL Server DBA. It was a mix of Oracle and SQL at the police force, but definitely more of the core systems working with Oracle. A lot of ETL processing, ETL processing within your teeth. Sort of if it fails, you've got 3 minutes to make it right. Because what they would do would produce all the reports for the sergeants at the start of a shift. But then I moved, as I say, into BT, into support, and sat with support for just over a year, and then moved into what was initially a SQL Server consultancy role, but I think because of how data in the cloud has changed now, I'm now just a data consultant, because we're considering more than just that relational world of SQL Server.
No, I get that. I mean, look, we'll probably dig deeper about that as well in a second. But I mean, look, let's pick you up on a few of those things then. So those career points. I mean, you mentioned you started off in pension. Was that like in a non-tech role? Were you in a tech role? How did that start about?
Um, it was a non-technical role. I actually started I picked up a bit of an agency job really, and I was actually on the
Yeah.
BT pension scheme of all places.
Okay. Yeah.
Um, the office was just up the road from where I lived, so it made it quite easy to get to. I don't know how I survived though, because I'll be honest, I did a tour of the building and then went and threw up and went home sick. So I don't actually know how I made it through
Well,
day
you must have
one
done
when
something right. You must have done something right. But I mean, the point is, did you start working in that role and then kind of move? You know, how did you do that transition into working with data? Then, what was the catalyst that made that happen for you?
the catalyst was probably when I was working on a scheme for a large pension provider. And it was just a case of, oh, does anybody want to get involved in writing some Oracle scripts? And now mathematics and data are so close, they work so well together. It kind of just made sense for me. I just put my hand up and went, yeah, I'll do that.
Mm,
Um, and it started there really, just from before. Um, in some
yeah.
respects, because at the time I didn't understand what Oracle was. And I think from there, you see, what I did was I went on to do an HND part time at evenings,
Hmm.
and an HNC, and then I did another year and a half, I think 2 years, to top it up to a full time degree. So what I actually did was a
Mm,
degree in applied computing. Um, and while I was doing that, one of the guys I did a lot of work with at college, one of the tutors, he was actually filling me in on some of the really big database projects that he'd worked for in the
hmm.
past, and I think that's where my initial sort of interest started. But I was still sort of working on different pension schemes. I actually went to a local government scheme and covered the teachers' pension scheme as well. So I was still sort of doing that in the day
Hmm.
job, um, and putting in the hours at night to do the degree. Because for
Yeah.
part of that time, I actually managed to spend 16 weeks on crutches as well. So all in one year.
Nice. Okay. So no pressure then. So you're working, you're on crutches, and you're studying for a degree. Yeah.
And I lived in a pub at the time as well.
I don't
So
know if that's a good or a bad thing. You know.
yeah. Well, this is it. The pub wasn't my responsibility, which was a good thing. Um,
No, absolutely. I think, well, that's cool, Em. I mean, you know, like I said to you just before we start recording, one of the points that I do these videos is really to try and understand some of the motivations, how people have come to work in certain tech areas. So, I mean, let's
yeah,
fast forward through your career then. So you ended up, you know, getting into tech purely from that position that you took from the pensions,
yeah,
understanding a bit more about data and working with Oracle databases. Now, you know, you mentioned you shifted from Oracle, you were working as DBA, looking at you moved more over to the Microsoft SQL side of things.
mhm.
I mean, what's your take at the moment then, with everything that's going on with cloud and certainly data in the cloud? You know, have you got any opinions, thoughts, where we're going with that, and what the deal is from your perspective?
I think definitely the DBA role has changed massively. I mean, you've kind of gone from sort of from SQL Server, you've kind of gone from just having to worry about, you know, your database engine, reporting services, analysis services, and integration services, to now sort of having to consider a whole lot of different aspects and elements. Data engineering, you know, yeah, that's creating pipelines, moving data around. Um, Also putting things like NoSQL in the database, using Cosmos, using so many different types and different flavors. I think being in the cloud's made it easier to be exposed to the different technologies, rather than just sort of being pigeonholed as a single
Mm.
technology DBA. I mean, somebody always told me that DBA does actually stand for designated blame acceptor. Um, and I will actually accept that in some respects, because the amount of times I've been sat in a support environment and somebody's gone, oh, it's going slow, oh, it's database, it's got a bit database, and
Mm.
and it's surprisingly
Well, it's
usually
between
not.
database and networking people, yeah? It's one or the other, surely.
Yeah, yeah, it is literally. It's like, oh, it's got a bit database. Database is going slow, and you look, and
Yeah.
it's not under pressure. Really, what is it doing?
Mm.
But
Mm.
I think it's nice to have. Now you've got the flexibility in some respects to, just turn the resources up and prove the point that actually it's not the database.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
it is a costly way to do it, but it is a much easier way to be able to sort of say, you can actually check where those pressures
Mm.
are and whether those bottlenecks are actually there. But I mean, for me personally, I've sort of becoming more interested in the data engineering element. I like the thought of getting, if you like a pile of data that is a mess, and turning it into something that somebody can actually make use of.
Mm.
It's almost like sort of going in with your feather duster and transforming it and cleaning it up, and almost dolling it up, hence dolled up
Yeah.
data. Um, so that it
I like
actually
it,
makes
yeah.
sense. That's when that penny drops with that customer, and they can actually see that all those lines, all those rows, all those columns can actually tell them what stock they need to order, so that they can order it in for next week based on last week's sales. Then
Mhm.
it suddenly data becomes a whole uh, really, really strong, useful tool.
Well, do you know what? You're right, Em. I think there's so many conversation I've had, and certainly the statement that gets banded around a lot is that data's the new gold for business. So, I mean, you hinted towards it, when you were talking about your previous career and, doing this ETL. I mean, for our viewers, do you want to describe what that ETL actually means?
Yeah.
And maybe, dig into that. What am I hearing about? Data's the new gold. Why? What have we got in the cloud that kind of helps us with working out
Yeah.
how do we, cash in our gold, so to speak?
Yeah, yeah. I think the thing about ETL processing, which is extract, transform, and load, it's about taking data from sources, one source, multiple sources, and actually transforming it into something that is going to be of use. So you can actually start aggregating values, so that it also takes like less pressure off your actual processing system to calculate these values on the fly. So
Hmm.
you use that transformation process to make the data into a useful format for, say, something like Power BI. Um,
Yeah.
or even SSRS on a VM, or even something like Click, another product that can plug into that data in that formation. I mean, it is, it's about pulling it together into a data warehouse, into that centralized location. And again, I think doing it in the cloud is a lot easier to set up the infrastructure, but it
Hmm.
is also easier to do it without having to know reams and reams of code.
I guess
Um,
is it that barrier to entry? Do you think the cloud? Because I certainly with a lot of other technologies, it just seems that if you're inquisitive or you're looking to try something out, there's a real low barrier to entry. I'm
yeah,
presuming that
yeah.
you're getting similar things in the data world.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you have got to remember that data does consume a lot if you leave things, if you sort of start firing up big, hefty machines, or big, hefty managed instances, or, even if you sort of
Mm.
move in terabytes and terabytes of data around, it is going to get expensive. But you can do that low entry format where you can just sort of go in, have a little play with something, and shut it down.
Hmm.
And there's also plenty of sort of Microsoft tools that let you test these things out. I think something that probably that is an area I want to be improving is sign-ups, and what sign-ups can give a customer. Again, it's basing
Hmm.
it on that model that's being transformed, that relation. It's about such bringing together relational data, non-relational data, so that you can actually put them together into a single unified area that wouldn't have necessarily been available with previous technologies.
Mm.
I think sort of getting MySQL data into a SQL Server database, for example, that's probably not the best example. Let's say we were putting to get non-relational data into a relational database on the older technology would take a hell of a lot of manipulation.
Okay.
It would be doable, but you would sort of have to start designing new schemas for that data to fit into. So you're talking about designing a whole new system just for it to talk to another relational database in some respects.
Right
Um,
with you. Yeah. Yeah.
so, because that background structure is different, it's not always easy to bring them together, which is where, again, where the flexibility of the cloud comes in, is that you can actually bring those together and use the pipelines to put them into something like a data lake, or introduce a delta lake to improve speed. So, it is about bringing everything together into that one centralized pot, which is where you get the pot of gold, where you can actually use something from, um,
Yeah.
a non-relational source and a relational source together, that years ago, you could almost guarantee there'd be somebody in the middle of it with a spreadsheet.
Yeah. Yeah. I know what you're saying. So, I mean, I guess just to understand the differences between relational and non-relational, I mean, it's those non-relational like object storages or JSON files that have got
Document
yeah,
databases, yeah.
documents libraries and yeah, I know what you're saying. So obviously with relational databases really conforming to a very strict schema of data types, foreign keys and primary keys and things like that. I guess it's the ability of using Synapse is to be able to quickly link those two different data sources together, I presume, is it, Em?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
That's cool.
yeah. And then when you've got things like Synapse Link, you can actually, use that for real-time stuff with Cosmos. So, then you're sort of away from the having to have the time to transform the data, and the real-time data is actually there for reporting purposes.
No, that's cool. That is cool. So, I mean, in that grand scheme of things, I mean, where is that going then? I'm presuming into some, we could take that into some kind of a machine learning
Yeah.
area. I mean, have you started? Is that where you're going at the moment, Em?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's the way forward, really, especially for our customers. It's okay to migrate to the cloud and leave your data there, but you know, why not use that to do something? Why not use that to show how you can improve, to show how your business can save money, or even why not use it to show how well you're doing? An issue issue information out to their own customers. This is how we're performing, and we could be responsible for bringing all that data together for them, for that performing, to see how they're performing, so that could and then incite more customers in. It's all about sort of, I think, for a customer, predicting what's going to happen.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, I
So
know you can't predict everything, but predicting as much as you can from based on what's previously gone before.
I guess, like you say, it's using the data that businesses have got. You mentioned it earlier on as well about for if the customer's like a retail customer or a shop, they can use the insights that they've got from their past orders and their past customers that they've had to kind of generate what may predict what may be happening in the future.
Yeah.
I mean, those kind of processes to go through that. Now, I've seen some of them. I've played with some of them myself. But I mean, what are you seeing at the moment in terms of businesses? Is there a large uptake on those kind of things? Are we still
Um,
early doors? What's your feelings around
I think I
working with
think
data?
I think for us personally, we're still early doors. I think there's a lot of development that we need to do to get to where we want to be. But I think customers are willing to look at it, but again, it is something that is very new. It's not new to us because we're in the industry, but it would be new to a customer who is, say, not involved in the tech
Yeah.
industry, that may have just heard somebody say AI at a conference somewhere. You know, so I think there's a sort of mixed bag of people out there that kind of know what it is ish, and they know it exists ish, but it's something that's happening for bigger firms at the moment, I think.
I guess how do they apply? Like you say, I guess those small, medium sized businesses, maybe even up to the small enterprises, they've heard the buzzwords over the last few years. They may have seen a demo, but how do they apply that to their business? I guess is
Yeah,
the big question that's missing at the moment. Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
that makes
yeah.
sense.
And that's something we like to try and sort of guide customers through. And and sort of drop those ideas in. I think it's about getting to know the customer business and
Hmm.
how the customer works, to then be able to create the answers to the questions that they have and that we'd have.
I mean, are you finding that, Em? Because so I suppose, like you say, when you look at your career history, that you've come from a world of working outside of the tech industry as a technical person, essentially, into that kind of role. You've worked your way through the ranks over the years, as most people do. Got your education. You're working as a DBA. You moved into consultancy. And I guess, are you seeing your role change again further then? Because you mentioned it there that a lot of these good decisions have to come from understanding the customer's business. Now,
Yeah.
that in theory is far removed even from a DBA role, where you say, you're looking after a database or a cluster, whatever it may be. You're looking after some infrastructure. You're making sure it's running appropriately.
Hmm.
You may be getting involved in the data layer itself and understanding and tweaking and doing some transform. How are you finding that? I mean, are you have you got any hints or tips? Are you aware of that on your journey? I mean, how do you see that at the moment, Em?
Yeah, I think that's where you kind of have to put your business analyst hat on. Um,
Hmm.
but you've still kind of got the technical questions in the background, but it's about transforming that into something that the customer can relate to and that the customer can understand. I think that's one of the important things that I can get carried away with the terminology.
Hmm.
Um, so I do find that I have to sort of stop myself and just remind myself that everybody doesn't know exactly what I'm talking about. So
Yeah.
I think thinking before I speak is one of the key things, that because there's that danger of saying that one tech word where a customer glazes over and you've completely lost them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so I think keep it simple, as simple as you can, is definitely, when it comes to sitting in front of a customer. I think that's definitely a tip I'd use, because that's the other thing as well, is don't panic. Keep it simple and don't panic. They're the two key things when you sat in front of a customer talking about data, because I think that's the one thing about data, is it's not one size fits all.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, data, certainly my involvement over the years has been that it's, you know, as much as you can operate and move things in very similar manners, it's really roll your sleeves up. You're in amongst the weeds, working with that business to do something with it. Absolutely,
Yeah.
I can see that completely. I mean, so I mean, in terms of working with customers at the moment and doing some of that cool stuff with it, I mean, how are you managing to stay on top of the learnings? Because I've had so many conversations with so many different people about cloud, the fast pace of change, the difficulty with keeping up to speed with the latest goings on.
Yeah.
What's your take on that, Em?
I will say that I did used to do a lot of the free online things that were done by SQL Pass. But then when SQL Pass had its problems, and um, went into administration, it was about finding other community groups, and definitely sort of when Microsoft pop up with a day session on migrating SQL Server, don't think you just know it all and there's no point in going.
Hmm.
You can't. Things change that fast that as soon as you have saved your documentation that you've just written, you can almost guarantee that it's out of date.
Hmm.
Um, so it is about keeping on top of the free things that are offered out there in the community. There's a lot of SQL bits resources on YouTube, that I keep an eye on. But I think as well, from my perspective, while we are developing our own internal processes around enterprise data modeling, um, you've got to keep on top of it to make sure that you're doing the best and the right thing for a customer.
Hmm. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think there's some, super cool technologies and things that have come out of obviously the cloud, and things just get better on a daily and weekly basis. But it's just that kind of, how do you as a consultant stay on top of that to make sure, like you say, that you're giving adequate guidance and information through to end users and customers. And yeah, I suppose I mean, I don't know how you see it, Em. I see it as a really difficult task. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm seeing I think I'm hearing the same
Yeah.
from you to a certain extent.
Yeah, I do find if I'm having a bad day, but I know I need to learn I know I need to learn something, I stick to what I know. So I will go
Yeah,
down and
yeah.
learn. I'll have a day with relational stuff in the cloud. Um, so I do find that if I've got a day where I'm not necessarily feeling 100%, I stick to what I know.
Mm,
Um, but there are,
yeah.
I think sometimes when you can have a conversation with a customer, or even a conversation like you and I have had, John, about
Mm,
things that are coming up, you kind of think, oh, I want to know how to do that. I'm going to go off and have a look.
mm, mm.
And then I make an assessment whether it's going to be any use um, for us as a business, for what we're doing as a business. There are certain things that you look at and you think, wow, it'd be great to use that. And then you're like, well, where can we actually use it?
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, it would be great to sort of all be running about with HoloLens headsets on, playing VR and things, but it's not really something that.
It's coming, Em. It's coming, Em. I'm
Oh
telling you.
yeah, I'd love it. I'd absolutely love it. But it's not something I don't think that we could sort of sell tomorrow.
Yeah, no, I
Um,
know, I know exactly what you mean. You're right. I think it's focusing. I mean, again, I've spoken to a few people about this. I'm guilty of it. The next bit of tech comes out, and you're like, "Ooh, shiny new tech. Let's go and have a little look at that." And it's like, yeah, that's completely not going to be used by anything I do in my day job for a
yeah,
good year or two, maybe. So I suppose what you're saying is finding that balance between what do you need to learn
yeah,
to take the next step in your day job, but
yeah,
equally keep your eye on what's coming next and the shiny stuff, but maybe try and find the balance between playing with the new shiny stuff and doing the business as usual stuff. Is that where you are? I guess.
yeah. And as I
Mm,
say, I just run with the fact that just because you've learned, say for example, just because you've learned about Azure SQL database this month, don't expect it to be the same in 6 months' time. Because
yeah.
it won't, because it's got to improve, it's got to change. Um, Nothing's perfect first time out, right? So
Well, do you know what? It makes me laugh, Em. As you know, I do these weekly videos, my Jonnychipz weekly videos, and more often than not, SQL or data is one of the areas in Azure that seems to get a lot of updates.
yes,
And of course, okay, I personally I've dealt with data in the past. I don't deal with it on a day-to-day basis, or I don't know if I just try and avoid it and leave that to you, Em. Do you know what I mean? It's like, right, that's Em's. You get on with that. But I don't, I'm not up to speed with it. So I read the updates and I'm there, and some of the terminology, I'm like, yeah, I'm reading this and it makes no sense whatsoever. So it's just such a
yeah,
huge area, I guess. Data. You've mentioned that we've got things like Cosmos, MongoDB, Azure SQL, Manage Instance, running it on an IaaS server. There are so many options out there, and it's almost like how do you make that choice? I'm not suggesting we go into it now, but it's like you kind of need to know, even if it's a little, about a lot. Just in the
yeah.
data plane. I mean, do you find that, Em?
Yeah, definitely,
Yeah.
definitely. Because there's some areas that, obviously I'd like to think, yeah, I could really brush up on that and really get into that, but you've still got to keep that space for keeping on top of those updates and keeping on top of making sure you're doing the best thing when it comes to the system and when it comes to the data that's in there.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. So, you mentioned community earlier on. You're talking about how you keep up to speed with the goings on in the world of data. What else are you up to in community at the moment? Because I know you're starting to find your feet again and come out and do a little bit more with community. What have you got going on in that space at the moment, Em?
Yeah, one of the big things that we've got coming up, or that I've got coming up, is SQL Bits, and I'm lucky enough to be on the volunteering team for that. So it does mean very long days, but it also means wall-to-wall data geeks, which is brilliant because that's where I get a lot of ideas from. I do a lot of networking, a lot of talking to people, and I think the first time I actually went to the conference, I went on my own, and I sort of didn't really talk to anybody for 5 days.
Yeah.
Um, so after that, I went as a volunteer, and it is non-stop talking now for 5 days, which is great. Um, it's a really good community event. I'm actually a SQL Bits ambassador, so I'm there for anybody that is attending on their own, or is thinking of attending, that's got any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. If I can't answer it, I certainly know a team that can.
Hmm.
But yeah, it is a jam-packed conference. We usually have a good curry night. There's always a quiz on. And the Friday night party is well worth staying for. It's fancy dress, in theme with the event. So yeah, it should be a
So
good.
is it an in-person event they're doing then? When is it, Em?
It is the 8th of March. It starts. So yeah, it is an in-person event down at Excel in London, and
Cool.
it is the biggest data conference in Europe. There's a lot of really, really cool, really clever people going to be there in attendance. So it is definitely worth checking out the schedule.
Oh, awesome. We'll
And
check it
Saturday
out.
is free.
So what? Okay, okay. Oh, it is a paid-for conference, is it? Apart
It,
from that,
it's a paid for conference. There are 2 full days that are training, and the other days are short, hour to an hour and a half short bus sessions. But Saturday is free, in line with SQL Saturdays. SQL Saturdays are always free throughout the world.
cool, cool. So we'll see you down there with your "How can I help" T-shirt on then, no doubt.
Yes, bright orange. You can. It is visible from space, but that's what makes us
Well,
stand out.
but it's cool that there's some in-person events coming back, I guess. So that'll be awesome. I know that there's certainly a few
Yeah,
more bits and pieces coming along now. So hopefully we'll start to see those in-person events coming back to it. But
yeah,
and
yeah.
that's brilliant. I mean, look, we're what do we know? We're hitting the half an hour mark here now. It's brilliant talking to you. Now, there's a question before I wrap up with most of my guests. I don't always ask it, but most of the time is around why are we doing all this, Em? What's the next big thing in tech for you? Where are we going with all this cool stuff that we're learning at the moment?
For me personally, it's getting into those machine learning models, and doing those predictions, and using it for something good. Let's get it out in the health industry, for example. Things that are struggling because of the pandemic. Can we do anything in the health space to ease pressure on the NHS, or can we do anything in the hotel industry, or even in the dentistry industry? Get AI involved and see how much AI can actually help support those industries come out of the pandemic.
Yeah, no, that seems to be the common theme at the moment, is that you hear big data, machine learning, AI seem to be getting involved in everything. So, I mean, I
Yeah.
guess that's where you're going to be pinning a lot of your future career for the next sort of 5 years or so. Then this is where
Yeah.
we'll find you working.
Yes. I'll be modeling, but no, certainly not on a catwalk.
Well, what could be better model than a data model, eh?
Exactly.
Oh, that was terrible. Okay, but look, it's been brilliant to catch up with you. Like I say, I should probably do the rounds with all the colleagues that I work with,
Yes.
but I have never done it up to now, really. But look, before we wrap it up, is there anything else you fancy chatting about now for a couple of minutes? Any last
Um,
words of wisdom that you might have?
no, I think just remember that data underpins everything. I think that's the key. Data underpins everything.
I think that's the
Um,
title of the video, isn't it? We'll leave it on that bombshell.
yes.
Data underpins everything. Well, it's true, it does. So there we go. Um, it's been fab having a chat and catching up with you.
Cool.
Thanks for finding the time and doing this, and we'll catch up on a Teams call after this video.
Cool. Thank you very much.
Cheers, Em. Catch you in a bit.
Bye.
Ta-da, ta-da.